Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today we're going to do something a little bit different. Today we're not going to look at the current titles, but instead at a possible future one. Total War: The Lord of the Rings. Could this happen? Tolkien's Legendarium is absolutely massive. The world of Arda has so many different cultures, races and backgrounds. A fantasy world with so much history, it spans back millennia. A universe which has seen tabletop games, movies, and even video games based around it. No matter how long it's been since these works were originally published, J.R.R. Tolkien's works are pretty much timeless classics, and as the years progress, many more film developers or game developers are looking to get their hands on the licensing for this expansive universe. We've already had games, namely the Battle for Middle-earth series, which already brought in some grand-scale battles for the Tolkien universe in video game format. But there is one series of games which many have requested to take on the challenge of interpreting the Tolkien universe in their own series. Creative Assembly's Total War series is known for its large-scale battles, with real-time tactical control and turn-based management. It's an absolutely massive series of games, which has recently, in the past few years, started delving into a fantasy setting, with that of Total War Warhammer. That in itself has been a massive success, and it's very likely that Creative Assembly would want to replicate this success with future fantasy-based titles. It's also important to note that there are a few extremely popular mods based on Tolkien's Legendarium for other Total War games. One perfect example would be the Divide and Conquer mod for Medieval 2, which almost has 2.5 million visits on their ModDB page. It is very likely that Creative Assembly are aware of these types of mods, and the popularity that follows around them. Most of these mods themselves are based on a very old game, so graphically and mechanic-wise things are quite dated. There are certain limitations which hinder these modders. And just a little disclaimer here, I have nothing against these modders of course. In fact, I think the only reason I go back to play Medieval 2 is because of mods such as Divide and Conquer. But now take the time to imagine what Creative Assembly themselves could make with all the new technology that they have available. Take into account all the new changes that have been brought to the Total War series by just the implementation of Total War Warhammer, Total War Three Kingdoms, and a Total War Saga Troy. So here lies the question, could Total War: The Lord of the Rings be possible? For that, we would need to look at a multitude of things. Firstly, the setting. The world of Arda itself is absolutely huge. For those not aware, the world of Arda is where the grand majority of Tolkien's works are based on, with only a small amount of the world itself being Middle-earth, which is the usual setting when game or film developers try to interpret Tolkien's works in their own way. The Lord of the Rings film series itself is only based on Middle-earth. There is so much more of a world to explore. That being said, it's very likely due to the nature of the scale of the world itself and the fact that the grand majority of people know Tolkien's works through the Lord of the Rings itself, the game would most likely be featured around Middle-earth. The War of the Rings setting also seems like the most viable option. This is the setting where the Fellowship of the Ring made their journey to Mordor in an effort to destroy the One Ring. Again, this is the setting that most people know, and is the setting which has been covered mostly in popular media. So rather than Creative Assembly taking a risk and expanding the whole world, it's more than likely that they'll focus around Middle-earth. Something like this is almost guaranteed to sell. A lot of stuff happens during the War of the Ring setting. Powers rising and falling, great kingdoms almost being turned to rubble, and a Dark Lord which eventually meets his end. Which now takes us to our second point, the possible playable races and factions. There are a multitude of different races and factions in the Middle-earth War of the Ring setting, all of which can vary drastically, not just in terms of playstyle but also aesthetic. Just for some examples, we have the fierce Uruk-hai of Isengard, an army of creatures bred for Saruman's ill-doings, the famed Horse Masters of Rohan, whose bond with their horses allows the men of Rohan to travel great distances at little time. And finally, the men of Harad, who have managed to tame great beasts which can cause absolute destruction on any who might find themselves in its path. These are just 3 of the possible races and factions that could be implemented in such a game. Now, the big issue here is that obviously Tolkien didn't go too much into their armies. And by this I mean that yes, we are aware more or less on the baseline type of troops that each race and faction would have, but we're not that aware of completely everything. We don't know exactly all the types of weaponry used by each respective race, or what exactly each of the troops would therefore be called. However, there is a fix to this. You see, the Tolkien estate has also worked with Games Workshop. Games Workshop, as everyone is most likely aware, is the creator of the Warhammer IP in all its forms, and they sold the licensing to Creative Assembly to make Total War Warhammer. But they have also worked with IPs that don't belong to them, and have also created games on these IPs. The most well known is that of Middle-earth Strategy Battle, a tabletop game which is quite long-standing, having been extremely popular during the release of the Lord of the Rings films and not so much during the release of The Hobbit. But that being said, Games Workshop and the Tolkien estate have worked on expanding the armies to be able to have fully fledged tabletop armies for each of the races and factions in Middle-earth. Due to the relationship of the Tolkien estate and Games Workshop, and obviously Games Workshop and Creative Assembly, it could be that these units created for the tabletop game could also be translated into a Total War Lord of the Rings. Obviously, there is a possible issue here in regards to a New Line Cinema, who themselves worked on the very popular Lord of the Rings films. This company interpreted the certain races and factions, heroes, characters and so on in their own way, and that seems to be the more common representation in popular media nowadays. So obviously, visually, the game might not look the same way as everyone else interprets it, which is perfectly fine in my opinion. I believe that there is enough art already to go through Tolkien's sketches and so on, which can already stand for a good basis of a new visual look. Unless, of course, Creative Assembly would be dead set on getting the rights from New Line Cinema in a similar way to how Games Workshop did, which once again could work in Creative Assembly's favour, as they've recently been working with Games Workshop in the creation of Total War Warhammer. So it is very possible that the current agreement between Games Workshop and Creative Assembly may benefit Creative Assembly in the future. There are obviously also talks about the Tolkien family being rather difficult to work with. From my understanding, it was Christopher Tolkien which was the most difficult to work with, as he was very passionate and loving about his father's work. Christopher Tolkien himself is no longer with us, rest in peace of course. So if it's the case that Christopher was the hardest one to work with, there should not be that many obstacles now. Also, bear in mind that despite the fact that many have claimed that Christopher was so difficult to work with, we still had games being released which were not lore-friendly whatsoever. The Shadow of War series is the perfect example, which is based on an alternate universe in Middle-earth. Something in the sandbox setting which would be as true to lore as humanly possible, given the fact that sandbox games can deviate from the original lore. I don't think that would be too much of a problem from the Tolkien estate. So at the end of this video, I want to say in conclusion that I believe it's very much possible to see a Lord of the Rings Total War game. To me, it makes the most sense as something which is so grand scale to be a future installment after the Total War Warhammer series has seen its conclusion. They'll most likely want to have another fantasy-based Total War game. It makes sense seeing as how well this one sold. In fact, I could easily see this happening so well that I could create a series of faction-focused videos without a problem, to highlight the possible units, legendary characters and so on that each race and faction may be able to have should this game ever become an actual reality. But what do you guys think about a possible Total War The Lord of the Rings? Do you think that this would be a possibility from Creative Assembly? And if so, where do you think the game would be based? just in Middle-earth, or throughout the whole of Arda? And what period of the timeline do you think it's more than likely to cover? The Silmarillion, the First Age, Second Age, Third Age, and so on. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below and let's start a bit of a discussion, shall we? But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fame level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.